There is a moment in every empire's life when decline stops being a theory and becomes a process. It's not a dramatic collapse, not tanks in the streets or flags coming down, but something quieter and far more dangerous. It's the moment when the system still looks strong on the outside, yet every decision being made quietly moves it closer to the same ending that has claimed every dominant power before it. History doesn't announce this moment, it repeats it. 500 years ago, Spain believed it had escaped the rules of history. They had discovered the New World, seized unimaginable quantities of gold and silver, and turned themselves into the financial center of Europe. Their ships controlled trade routes, their armies dominated battlefields, and their currency moved effortlessly across borders. For a time, Spain didn't just participate in the global system, it was the system. And that's always where the illusion begins. When power becomes so large that it feels permanent, unbreakable, immune to consequences. But empires don't collapse because they lose one war or make one mistake. They collapse because they follow a pattern, a sequence of decisions that feel rational in the moment and catastrophic in retrospect. At first, the empire expands, influence grows, commitments multiply. Military protection is promised everywhere because power demands presence. The cost is enormous, but it feels manageable because the economy is still strong and the currency still trusted. No one notices the strain yet. They rarely do. Then comes the subtle shift. Instead of producing more, the empire begins relying on its position. Why build when you can buy? Why innovate when money flows freely? Wealth becomes detached from productivity. Gold, silver, bonds, or paper currency flood in, but the underlying engine weakens. The empire starts consuming more than it creates. Its imports rise, exports stagnate. This imbalance doesn't feel dangerous because the currency still buys anything it wants. But that confidence is borrowed time. To maintain the illusion of stability, debt grows. Not all at once, but steadily. Borrowing becomes normal, necessary even. Old debts are rolled into new ones. Spending is justified as essential to security, prosperity, or global leadership. The numbers get larger, but they remain abstract. Trillions don't feel real. Interest payments are ignored because they haven't yet caused pain. As the empire convinces itself that this time is different, it never is. As debt expands, the currency quietly erodes. It's not overnight, but year after year. Purchasing power declines, prices rise, wages lag behind. The empire insists this is temporary, transitory, manageable, but the mechanism is ancient. Whether through debased silver coins, abandoned gold standards, or endless digital printing, the outcome is the same. Trust thins, value leaks away. And while all of this unfolds, social cohesion begins to crack. Institutions lose credibility. Inequality widens. Productive citizens disengage or leave. Politics becomes louder and more dysfunctional because the system can no longer deliver what it once promised. The empire still looks powerful, but it's hollowing out from the inside. This is the point where history starts whispering instead of shouting. Spain reached it in the late 1500s. Britain reached it after World War I. The Soviet Union reached it in the 1980s. And once an empire reaches this stage, the remaining steps don't require malice or conspiracy. They unfold automatically, driven by math, incentives, and human behavior. The dangerous part isn't that collapse is guaranteed. It's that by the time people recognize the pattern, they're already living inside it. And that's where our story truly begins. By the time an empire realizes it is no longer ascending, it has already changed its priorities. Survival replaces growth. Stability replaces ambition. And that shift quietly rewires every decision it makes. At this stage, leaders don't ask, how do we build more? They ask, how do we keep this from falling apart? The answers almost always look the same. More control, more spending, more borrowing, more promises. As reversing decline requires sacrifice, and sacrifice is politically expensive. It's easier to postpone pain than to confront it. This is where the financial system becomes the empire's lifeline and its trap. Debt stops being a temporary tool and becomes structural. Governments borrow not to invest, but to function. To pay salaries, to fund welfare, to maintain military presence, to service previous debt. The system turns circular. Money is borrowed to pay interest on money borrowed before. On paper, everything still works. In reality, the empire is running on credit-backed confidence. Central banks step in as saviors. Interest rates are lowered. Liquidity is injected. Markets are reassured. Each intervention buys time, but at a cost. Cheap money distorts incentives. Asset prices inflate faster than real productivity. Stocks rise, real estate booms, but the average citizen feels poorer. Wealth concentrates. Trust erodes. And here's the crucial detail history keeps repeating. Global empires don't just collapse internally. They lose their external privilege first. For centuries, dominant powers enjoyed a unique advantage. Their currency was accepted everywhere. Others saved in it, traded in it, borrowed in it. This allowed the empire to live beyond its means without immediate consequences. Deficits didn't matter. Debt didn't hurt. Printing money didn't trigger collapse because the rest of the world absorbed the cost. But that privilege is fragile. It depends entirely on confidence. Once rival powers emerge, once trade starts bypassing the dominant currency, once alternatives feel safer or more stable, demand weakens. Slowly at first, quietly. A few bilateral agreements here, a new settlement system there, gold accumulation, local currencies in trade. None of it looks threatening on its own. Together, they signal a shift. The empire responds the only way it knows how, doubling down. Sanctions become more common. Financial systems are weaponized. Access to markets is controlled. This works briefly. But weaponizing trust accelerates its loss. Allies grow cautious. Neutral states hedge. The world begins preparing for a future where dependence is dangerous. Meanwhile, inside the empire, the consequences intensify. Inflation becomes persistent. Living standards stagnate. Debt ceilings become recurring crises. Political polarization hardens because resources are no longer expanding, only redistributed. Every group feels under attack. Every election feels existential. This is the phase where people start asking the wrong questions. They ask who's to blame, which politician failed, which ideology ruined everything. But empires don't fall because of bad people. They fall because systems reach limits, because exponential debt collides with finite productivity. Because confidence can't be printed forever. The most unsettling truth is this. Decline, dose, and tea feel like decline when you reincite it. Feels like chaos, confusion, unfairness, nostalgia. It feels like something valuable has been lost, but no one agrees on what. History shows that once an empire enters this phase, outcomes vary, but none are painless. Some manage a slow, controlled descent into a smaller role. Others experience sudden shocks that force rapid adjustment. The path depends on choices, timing, and luck. But the direction is rarely reversed. And this brings us to the present moment, where the patterns of the past are no longer buried in history books, but visible in real time. The question is no longer whether empires decline. The question is, who pays the bill when they do? When an empire finally reaches this stage, the most dangerous illusion still remains the belief that someone else will pay the price. Politicians imply it will be the wealthy. Economists suggest it will be future generations. Media narratives hint at foreign enemies or abstract systems. But history is brutally consistent on one point. The bill always comes due, and it is almost never paid by those who created it. It is paid by ordinary people, not through dramatic confiscation or sudden collapse, but through slow, grinding mechanisms that feel almost invisible while they work. Inflation becomes the quiet tax. Savings lose value year after year. The money that once represented security slowly turns into numbers that buy less food, less stability, less future. Wages chase prices but never quite catch up. Hard work stops guaranteeing progress. At the same time, debt holders are protected. Large institutions, banks, and governments restructure, refinance, or inflate their way out. Numbers on balance sheets are adjusted. Rules are rewritten. Losses are socialized, while gains remain private. This isn't conspiracy, it's design. Systems always protect themselves first. Then comes the moment of reckoning, which history presents in different forms. Sometimes it's a currency reset, a new standard. It's a temporary measure that quietly admits the old promises can't be honored. Sometimes it's a debt restructuring framed as necessity, fairness, or modernization. Sometimes it's a shock financial, political, or geopolitical that forces rapid change. But no matter the trigger, the result is the same. The purchasing power of the past does not survive into the future. Empires rarely announce this as failure. They call it reform. What's most unsettling is that many people sense something is wrong but can't articulate it. They feel they're running faster yet falling behind, that the rules change without their consent, so that stability, the kind their parents assumed was permanent, has become fragile. This psychological shift is as important as the economic one. Once trust breaks, it rarely returns in the same form, and this is where cycles complete themselves. New systems begin forming in the shadows of the old. New powers rise while denying they seek dominance. New currencies, technologies, and alliances appear not to overthrow the system outright, but to prepare for its eventual weakening. The world doesn't reset overnight. It transitions slowly, unevenly, painfully. The final stage of decline isn't collapse, it's irrelevance. The empire still exists, its cities still stand, its institutions still function. But it no longer sets the rules. It reacts instead of leads. Its currency is still used, but no longer trusted without question. Its influence fades not with a bang, but with indifference. And here's the truth most people never hear. This process is not rare. It is not exceptional. It is the default. Every empire believed it was the exception. Everyone had reasons why history wouldn't apply to them. Everyone was wrong. The real question, then, isn't whether this cycle is unfolding again. The evidence suggests it is. The real question is whether individuals can see it early enough to adapt. Because history doesn't punish ignorance with cruelty. It punishes it with repetition. And those who fail to understand the cycle don't just witness it. They live inside its consequences. And this is where the story truly ends. Not with a prediction, not with a date, but with a choice. History shows us that financial systems don't collapse to zero. They shed promises. They abandon guarantees that can no longer be honored. What disappears isn't money itself, but the trust behind it. And when trust fades, people instinctively search for something solid, something that feels real again. In every past cycle, those who survived the transition weren't necessarily the richest. They were the ones who understood what was happening before it became obvious. They adjusted their expectations. They diversified what they depended on. They stopped assuming that yesterday's rules would protect tomorrow's outcomes. This is why financial history matters. Not because it tells us what will happen next, but because it reveals what always happens eventually. Power concentrates, debt expands, confidence peaks. And then, quietly at first, the foundations begin to crack. By the time collapse becomes visible, adaptation is already difficult. The most dangerous belief in any era is thinking that stability is permanent. Empires fall when people outsource their understanding to authority. When they stop questioning how value is created, preserved, and transferred. When convenience replaces curiosity. The system doesn't need everyone to believe in it, only enough people to keep it running. But cycles don't care about belief. They move forward regardless. The end of one financial order is always the beginning of another. The winners of the next era are rarely those who dominated the last one. They are usually observers, thinkers, and quiet adapters, people who noticed the signs, studied the patterns, prepared psychologically before preparing materially. This is why history repeats, not because humans are foolish, but because systems reward short-term comfort over long-term awareness. And so the conclusion is not fear, it's clarity. Understanding financial history doesn't make you immune to change, but it gives you something far more valuable: context. It allows you to recognize when narratives replace reality, when confidence masks fragility, and when stability is being borrowed from the future. The cycle will continue with or without our attention. The only question left is simple. Will you experience it as a victim of surprise? Or as someone who saw the pattern coming? Because history is not a warning, it is a mirror, and it reflects the same truth every time.